Hi everybody, welcome to the second episode of 23rd Mind TV.
We're so excited to be back. This has been so much fun, and thank you so much for all the great feedback and input and comments you've made since the last episode.
Yeah, it was kind of fascinating to see the great response, and we're of course very happy. We love doing this, but it's also great to feel that there's some kind of communication going on. So please keep the feedback coming, and special thanks to our patrons at Patreon. That was the original idea with this TV show.
Yeah, and since we met our goal and started this show, then we had to come up with a new goal. So our new goal is going to involve us writing a book together.
Yeah, because we've recently, both of us, we'll talk more about this also, we've both of us recently wrapped up 2 major book projects. So now we're facing this kind of horror vacui, you know, the dread of the void. But we are going to solve it by starting a writing project. We'll write like an exquisite corpse kind of experimental novel on Patreon.
Exactly. So we're going to make our next goal 666 because that's what we do. And then when we reach it, we're going to start putting out chapters of the book. We're going to rotate back and forth, 1 chapter from me, 1 chapter from Carl, every full moon and new moon until the book is finished. Mm-hmm. I've been wanting to start to play with writing fiction anyway, so I'm going to practice writing fiction this way and integrating my cut-ups into the writing, which is something I've been wanting to do for a while.
Mm-hmm. And it's just the format of Patreon is very good for this, because it'll be like posts that are not about us doing this or us doing that, but it'll be actual chapters of the book. So, and the frequency of twice per month at every full and new moon, you know, I think that's an adequate, a suitable tempo for it. You want to know what's happening next. It's not too stressed, but it's also not an eternity in between them. So twice a month you'll be able to read what's going on, not with the book, but in the book.
Yeah, so we're really excited about that.
Mm-hmm. And that's for our patrons on the level of $10 per month or more. So if you feel that you want to, you know, catch up and read that novel while it's being written in a way, join us on Patreon on the $10 level. Thank you.
And as my patrons know already, literally this morning I sent in my book manuscript to the publisher. And I just have to tell you, I showed this on Patreon already, but for everyone who's not on Patreon, and for everyone who maybe didn't see it, this is the book, and I actually ended up having to print it out and literally cut it up and like staple it back together in places, because I found that I'm just so immersed in the cut up method that I just couldn't edit on the computer screen anymore. So I literally cut and pasted the book back together after cutting it up. So that was interesting for me to see my own process and see how much I practice what I preach.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk more about your book slightly later, but you've also been putting out some new podcasts.
Yeah. So the podcast is Rendering Unconscious, as you know. We started to put these episodes on the podcast as well. Since Rendering Unconscious podcast has turned 2, I've had a few guests on. Christos Tombras came on, who's a Greek psychoanalyst living in England, and he spoke about his book and his work with the body and Lacanian psychoanalysis and looking at Lacan and Heidegger. So that was really fascinating. And then just this week, I spoke with Stephen Shihai, and we talked about his project Decolonizing the Humanities. So definitely check that out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And of course, as most of you know, Rendering Unconscious is not only a podcast, but also a book project that you've been editing and putting together. This book came out last year, and it's doing really well. It's been well received, and for me as a publisher, it was interesting to work with something different than the normal, cultural vein that I'm usually in. It was fascinating to work with and to read. It's a great mix of technical, clinical stuff, but also there's poetry in there and more like philosophical pieces about the nature of psychoanalysis and its implications on culture. Really, really interesting stuff. So if you have any sort of interest in psychology or the human mind, it would be great for you to check these things out, both the podcast Rendering Unconscious, but also of course the book, which is very, very good and heavy.
Yeah, and one of the things, it's a big book. One of the things that Freud said is that anytime he worked through to another kind of aspect of his psychoanalytic theory, that he always realized that a poet had been there before him. So I included poetry in the book as well, and I thought every now and again I'll read you a little piece from the book so you can see kind of what is inside it. Also, please take note of this incredible cover art by Allison, an amazing artist in California.
Yeah.
I just had to show that to you.
Yeah.
And we'll open up to this page that I just opened to and do a little bibliomancy with Rendering Unconscious. So this is a piece from Jessica Dadema, who's a professor in New York and New Jersey. And it's called Blind Sightings of Black Swan. Social erosion accompanies the increase in accidents, which used to be more spaced out. Jacques-Alain Miller calls this a crisis moment, one of the master signifiers of our time, and a way of naming the real. Hypermodern culture is characterized by black swan accidents and constantly caught hold of by a reel in succession of moments of crises without respite. Hardly has a symbolic system been established than it falters to give place to another. Instead of routine, there is a series of crises, crisis, which tend towards the infinite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of books, I mentioned that we have both wrapped up book projects. For me, I feel, again, this sort of void at the moment because it's basically just a couple of days ago that I wrapped it up. I've written a new novel called The Devil's Footprint. Some of you may have read my first novel, Mother Have a Safe Trip. And it's, what can you say, it's not the same, but it's not different either. It's just a very fast-paced, trippy, very satirical, but also exciting, I hope, novel about kind of a shift of power or a power dynamic that needs to go into new areas to fix this mess that humans are in. And it's basically about the devil or Satan having been given not a carte blanche, but a kind of carte noire from God to fix the human mess. And that leads to some pretty, funny and chilling and terrifying, but also amusing and entertaining moments in a narrative that's straight from the horse's mouth, straight from the devil's mouth. So I think that's it will probably interest you to read that. But first, of course, we have to find an agent and a publisher. That will happen during this year, and then it'll be out as soon as possible. And it's an amazing thing to write fiction. I want to do more of that because I think that in fiction lies truth inherent, embedded in a much more actually naked and exposed way than in journalism or scientific academic writing. Fiction is powerful. And I certainly want to write more of that. And again, that's why we're doing the other book too on Patreon.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I comment on in the book that I just finished, which is Scansion in Psychoanalysis and Art, The Cut and Creation, is that artists are able to say things that people don't say so readily in their day-to-day lives. And I think the same thing goes with like the art of fiction. And people are able to say truths more clearly and blatantly, maybe than they would be able to in their day-to-day lives.
Absolutely, and it's just not only is it something that engages people in very much the same way as when people watch movies or something fictional on a screen or in the cinema. It's an engagement that goes deeper because it sort of sets aside the defense mechanisms of the rational mind. That can be a bad thing if you look at propaganda and demagogia, stuff like that, but it could also be a very benevolent and beneficial thing if people relax and take in quality writing or a quality movie and become engaged with the emotions and the ideas that are embedded in this in the fictional work. So why don't you tell us a bit more about your book?
Well, this book's been percolating in my mind for many, many years, and as a lot of you know, I talk a lot about different kinds of art, and I've written a lot of articles on different artists. And something I realized a few years ago was that all of the artists that I tend to be drawn to and to write about and think about all use the cut or scansion in some way, whether it's cut-ups and cutting up language, or doing collage work and cutting up image, mixing image and language, image with text, assemblages, or cutting the body, different sorts of body modifications. They all kind of had this thread throughout them. So I decided at some point that I should write a book about that. And I'd already written a few articles on different artists, so I could pull from, what I had already been working on. Then, of course, that was, I don't know, I decided to do that maybe in 2014. And then I got a little bit derailed because I started doing cut-ups myself. I thought, how am I going to start this book? So I started cutting up the writing that I had written about these artists who worked with cut-ups. And then I started cutting that up and making cut-ups myself. And then for the past 5 or 6 years, I've been immersed in my own cut-up process. And then I guess about a year and a half ago, I decided to focus again on the writing of the book that I had the idea for so long ago. And that just got handed into the publisher today. So very excited about that. It's been a long time coming. All sorts of artists that I can mention that are in it. You might not see the connection, but you'll have to read the book and see how I connect them all. Charlotte Rogers, Genesis Breyer Peorage, Derek Jarman, Vicki Bennett, Val Denham, Annie Bandes, Elijah Berger, Joel Coleman, Joel Peter Witkin. The list goes on and on.
I want to read it. Actually, I have read it. And
it's good.
It's a very good book. And, speaking of cut-ups also, we can never drift too far away from it. We have also, a couple of weeks ago, released a new CD that also bloomed into something else. And we're talking about the soundtrack for Mementeros. Mementeros was the film project that we finished last year. And it's not just a film project. It started out with you cutting up texts that I had written or assembled, and then you recorded that, you read them, and then I set that to music, and then we made the film, and then we made a couple of art shows with like screenshots from the film that you applied cut-ups and collages on. So it's like this never-ending process, which is really fun for us to work with, and again, people seem to like it a lot. And what we did with the soundtrack, we made a limited edition CD that comes with information sheets and some reproductions of some pretty erotic collages, and then the deluxe box set is also quite beautiful in that it also contains a DVD of the film and then some photographs of us, dare I say, erotic, and just more stuff. And the thing is that we do these in very limited runs, and deluxe is often, they sell out really quickly. Right now we only have 2 of the boxes left, but the CD we still have a few of the normal edition. So you should check that out. And as we spoke about last time, I really enjoy making these things, not just the assembly line aspect of it, but I really like the quality of CDs. They have grown in my esteem, I have to say. Really nice way of presenting music, basically.
It's also really nice to listen to entire albums.
Yeah.
It's something I've been doing a lot lately because I feel with Spotify and kind of iTunes and shuffling, you're always listening to just songs here and there from different artists. And I love to do that when I'm writing or, and I don't want to have to get up and change the record or something like that. But I think there's something really wonderful about listening to an entire album. If there's an artist that you really like, it's nice to hear how they put together the piece. It's an art piece.
Yeah, no, it totally is. It's most albums are assembled in a particular way because of a particular reason or a preference from the artist. So I think one should respect that. But on that subject of CDs and stuff, we will of course make more. Maybe we'll keep this frequency of one release per month. I certainly like it, and it seems that the people who buy stuff from us like it a lot too. So. Yeah.
Yeah, so far we've done boxes for Cut to Fit the Mouth, which was our first album. The Chapel is Empty, which is me with Kevin Wright of Acoustic Timbre Frequency, and now Mementeros.
Yeah, and there will be more very soon. We have an endless amount of titles, both old and new ones, to release, basically. And speaking of music, and speaking of film, again,
Books.
And books. I have recently. I'm in the process of wrapping up my latest film, which is a documentary about the Swedish photographer Lars Sundestrand, and he is very well respected here in Sweden, and he had a fanzine back in the late 70s called Fun Time. Your normal but high quality punk fanzine with photographs and on the spot interviews, really nicely done with a lot of cut and paste DIY aesthetic, and that really affected me when I was young, when I was sort of waking up to music and the culture of punk and post-punk. And I later on in 1985 started my own fanzine called Lollipop, and that was very much inspired by Lars Sundestrand's Fun Time fanzine. So I've been talking to Lars over a couple of years about that time, that era, about DIY, about people he met, funny anecdotes, and of course focusing on his photographs and his aesthetic. And it's been a wonderful experience of going back and also into the mind of someone who inspired me when I was just a teenager. So it's very, very cool. And I think that film will be wrapped up within a month or so, and it will be available on Vimeo on demand with English subtitles, and you'll be able to see previously unpublished and very rare photographs of Throbbing Gristle, Psychic TV, Joy Division, Residents, many other very cool artists.
Lars's photographs are incredible.
Yeah, they truly are. And this is the standard cement. Speaking of which, great old photographs and great experiences that stem back from the mid-80s. I am proud to say that and happy that this book arrived. We talked about it in the previous episode, Sacred Intent, Genesis by Peorage, Conversations with Carl Abrahamsson, 1986 to 2019. And this is a strange kind of memory lane trip for me, having worked with it, but specifically now that I can sit and hold it and look at it and look at the pictures. It contains about 50 pictures from 86 up until 2019. And I could blab on for an eternity about this, but I would really recommend that you check out this book, Sacred Intent, because if you have any interest in what Jen's been doing in the different constellations and bands and projects, or with Pandrogyny together with Lady J, it's just quite a trip. That's the best way to sum it up. And the book form really works well for that kind of summing up of, it's a friendship, but it's also substantial conversation about really interesting things.
Life. And it also has a interview with Lady J, which is really rare to find.
Yeah,
so.
previously unpublished. Yeah. And actually, most of these interviews are previously unpublished. Some of them have been over the years, but most of them haven't. They were actually made specifically for this book. We had no idea when the book was going to come out, but then we decided last year that since Jen turned 70 on February 22nd, happy birthday, Jen, we decided that we should have the book ready for that occasion, and that's exactly what happened. Jen's copies were sent to New York and reached him on the birthday. So that was good timing.
Mm-hmm. And you're having a release party for it in New York.
Exactly. We are going to America very soon. And one of the things that is going on is a book release or book evening with me and Jen talking about the book at Mast Books. On March 19th. You will, write down some more information about that too. But that will be a great event and a very unique event. And if you are in New York, you should definitely come by so you can have the book signed by us both.
Yeah, and if you can't make it on the 19th, or even if you can, come join us that weekend, because Film Noir Cinema is having a Carl Abrahamsson Film Festival the weekend of the equinox, the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. And so we'll be there with Carl's films being screened.
Yeah, it'll be fantastic to meet people, and we're showing the LaVey film Into the Devil's Den and My Silent Lips, which is a psychosexual thriller, and the documentary about Genesis, Change Itself, and also the documentary about Kenneth Anger called Cinemagician. And again, if you're in New York, please come to the Film Noir Cinema. If you're not, all of these films can be watched on the Vimeo On Demand site. Yeah. We have received some cool stuff. Thank you for that. People who send us stuff, we're very appreciative, and we enjoy it, and we do take our time to look through things and read things. And we want to mention now specifically a couple of books that arrived from Black Letter Press, based in Italy, but publishing very beautiful editions of old arcane esoteric books. This one is the Black Pullet, and we have here one called Moonlore, the old facsimiles of stuff, and it's very, very well done. And if you have an interest in Gothic occultism, arcane stuff, old school magic, and the basically Western ceremonial tradition, and
reading ribbons. Yeah, I love.
Reading ribbons, and simply bookcraft. I really love when things are well made, and because books are great, but a great book deserves to be in a great format and packaging, and this is really well done. So you should check out Black Letter Press. They have many interesting books out there, and they're beautiful and highly recommended.
And then I want to show off Katelan Foisy's amazing work as well, because she makes these incredible boxes full of all sorts of lovely items, like bath salts that she creates herself, body scrubs. She sends you sets of candles with all these herbs and energy and glitters melted in, and little bags of crystals and dice and all sorts of amazing things. There's some playing cards here. And I know she still has a couple of these on her site the last time I looked, but they're always selling out, but she's always making more. So if you want something that's like really just to pamper yourself, and have some magical self-care, go to Katelan Foisy's shop, because I can tell you, she says that she does Reiki as well, and she says she charges these bath salts with whatever frequency. I don't know anything about Reiki, but I can tell you that after I take a bath with her bath salts, I really feel like I'm vibrating. It just feels really great. So check those out.
And of course, Katelan is a good friend and a real beautiful witch. She really knows her stuff, and it just struck me when you were talking about that. It's there are similarities to people working with beautiful editions of beautiful books. Things deserve to be tangible, visceral. You need to take things and touch them and work with them and integrate them in your sensual sphere. A lot of the magic that we're working with lies and comes from the sensual sphere, and is processed in the sensual sphere, and that kind of tangible witchcraft is very, very valuable. And it's beautiful to see people like Katelan, who are artists as much as magicians, and vice versa, work with their own aesthetic at the same time as they are tools. So that it's not just a box with cool stuff. It can be, and it works great as a gift box or something, but it's a gift box with potency, with agency, and it's really well made, and there's a bright mind and a great aesthetic mind pulling these things together.
Yeah, you can tell that she really takes care to choose all the different items. Like mine came with this amazing candle holder, this antique candle holder that I just absolutely adore, and now I carry it all around the house with me. And then I got one for somebody as a gift that was a road opener, to help like clear blockages, and so that the road can be clear in front of you to be able to make your own way forward. So it's a craft.
It's a craft, exactly. And magic may well, magic, it's all in the mind, etc., etc. And that may be the case, but there are many roads going into the mind and into the magic of the mind, and that's when we delve into, talismania, talismanic things. And Katelan's stuff is just a box filled with fantastic talismans.
Yeah, but I think the point you made too about it being sensual and engaging the senses,
yes,
that's something that I think is really important nowadays. The more that we get virtual, the more it feels like we need to make sure we also take care of our bodies and engage our senses.
Absolutely. If it smells good, it is good. If it feels good, it is good. If it looks good, it is good. Yeah. And then we were talking about books. We've been receiving some other stuff as well. I wanted to mention Underworld Amusements, out of a publishing company out of Baltimore. Many years of releasing so much good stuff. It's almost incomprehensible. Really a fantastic thing. And we have, it's slightly satanic bent. Here's what you call like a definitive edition of Ragnar Redbeard's Might is Right, which is quintessential for Anton LaVey when he penned the Satanic Bible, for instance. And this edition has an introduction by Peter Gilmore from the Church of Satan, and it's just annotated, and it's just really the definitive version of Might is Right, which is quite an influential book. And also this beautiful thing, Carducci's Hymn to Satan, in translation from the Italian, which also has both the Italian and English translations, and it's really nice with someone who looks back at a heritage, at a lineage of culture, and makes sure that things like this are available, and not just in some very rare, very expensive 19th century edition, but introduced, annotated, and just presented in the best possible way. Underworld Amusement also worked a lot with presenting the oeuvre, the work of Benjamin de Caceres, and many other prominent cynics, egotists, and misanthropes, and this wonderful bouquet of dark side intellectuals, basically. So check out Underworld Amusements. You will find many cool things there, and it's a publishing company that I really respect.
And then last but not least, I want to make sure to mention my dress. My dress is from Marshmallow by Lady. They make amazing things. Check them out.
So thank you. This was the second episode of 23rd Mind TV, and the best way to keep to follow us on a day-to-day or a weekly basis is to become a patron at Patreon. That's where we present news. As soon as there's news, it'll be at Patreon. We talk about our process. We show candid photographs and photographs from our trips and developments of long-term projects. Basically, that's our social media hub. So if you want to keep following us on a more regular, frequent basis, come to Patreon. And also, do not miss the fact that very, very soon, as when we reach the level of $666 per month at Patreon, we will start publishing on a bi-weekly basis chapters from our new experimental novel called The Exquisite Corpse. Thank you for watching. Bye.